I'm not one who believes that rules should be followed at all costs and never be questioned, but that said, I think it's important to respect rules and always remember there's very likely a good reason for them. This certainly applies in this story. Construction workers got permission to label a parking spot "no parking" in order for them to be able to complete difficult work. Already forced to carry heavy lumber uphill, 2 parking spaces at the bottom of the hill were reserved for them in order to make their lives a bit easier. One woman, however, chose to not only ignore the rules, but selfishly disregard their needs to fulfill her own. That, however, is something she would soon come to regret. Very, very much. For me, no parking is a sign that's easy to understand. But the woman in this story apparently thought the rules didn't apply to her. People find a lot of creative ways to deal with asshole drivers, but this lady was so disrespectful that she needed a lesson she wouldn't forget. This clever construction worker from Larkspur, California knew exactly how to get revenge. Luckily for us, he then took to social media to tell the rest of the world about it. In his Reddit post, user BBQ Lunch starts explaining that he's a foreman for a new house build at a kinda strange location. The house is 250 feet up a hill via a footpath only. All of our materials have to come up this footpath by hand. It's a pain in the ass to manual carry, quite literally an entire house up this hill, the construction worker wrote. One of the workers' saving graces was 2 parking spaces at the bottom of the hill. The parking spaces were reserved for the construction workers only. Both the spots were also clearly marked with official "no parking" signs. But with a school nearby, many parents think it's okay to use the spots a couple times a day. The foreman explained, "If someone is parked in the spots and we don't have a delivery or need to park a truck, I'll let it go. But sometimes the spots are needed and then the foreman have to ask the parents to move their cars. Most of the time they do so immediately. Until today," he wrote. The foreman came face to face with a driver that refused to move her car from a no parking zone after he politely asked her to. All the construction workers were doing their work peacefully, but this rude lady stood in their way and prevented their work. After hearing about the situation, the foreman approached to let the driver know that she needed to move. They had a delivery coming any minute and needed the space. But instead of abiding by the law or just common courtesy, the woman was rude enough to offer a chill pill. She scoffs at me and rudely states back, "I'll just be a few minutes and your truck isn't here. Take a chill pill, dude," the foreman recalled. The guy could have lost his patience, but instead he came up with a foolproof plan to teach the woman a lesson. I put on my best customer service smile and waved at her through the window. She put it down halfway and angrily shouts, "What?" he wrote. By now the truck is pulled up alongside her car and I politely ask her again with a stronger tone of voice to move her vehicle, reminding her that she's illegally parked in a tow-away zone, he continued. Then she gives me this wonderful idea. She says, "Can't you guys just unload around me? Jesus, it's not that hard." After that, the foreman smiled and walked away while the brilliant plan was played up in his head. I instruct the delivery driver to park as close to her as possible and block her in with the porta potty that's at one end of our reserved spots and the parked car that's parked just adjacent to our spots on the other end. He smiles because he immediately gets what I'm trying to do and proceeds to expertly block this lady in her car into a little 2 parking spot jail, the foreman explained. As his guys unstrapped the lumber and began humping material up the hill, the foreman called the police parking enforcement to let them know the situation. I wasn't trying to get her in trouble. I just wanted a record of why we were blocking part of the street so we don't get in trouble with the city, he said. In the midst of all this, the woman's child appeared. Mom is just now realizing that the lumber truck is parked so close she can't get out of her driver door to meet her kid, the foreman wrote. She awkwardly clambers across the inside of her car and stumbles out the passenger door, shooting glaring looks at me and the truck driver in the process. She loads her kid into the back and then begins to realize that she has no way of leaving. Now the mother was suddenly in a hurry. She stormed up to the construction workers and said that they needed to move their damn truck right away. Before the foreman could respond, the delivery driver gets a grin on his face and says, "Ma'am, in order to unload the lumber on the truck, we had to unstrap it, and per our company policy, I'm not allowed to move the truck with any unsecured load on it. Sorry." The woman loses it, screaming obscenities, and has a near aneurysm level of blood pressure. "Fuck your policy, I have somewhere to be," the woman barks. At this point, with impeccably convenient timing, the parking enforcement officer shows up and parks behind the truck. The woman doesn't see the officer arrive, and while the officer is still getting out of her vehicle, the foreman just casually said, "Can't you just pull out around it? It's not that hard," with a big smile on his face. "Fuck you," she yells back and storms back to her car and angrily clambers back in through the passenger door and into the driver's seat. At this point, the parking enforcement officer is walking up to the driver. But before she can even introduce herself, the woman in the car slams it in reverse and stomps on the gas, crashing into our porta potty and knocking it over, and then throws the car into drive and tries to mount the curb and drive on the sidewalk. The officer, driver, and the foreman are staring in disbelief as she gets halfway over the curb and gets stuck. I can hear her screaming obscenities over the idling truck from inside her car. The officer promptly walks up to the door of the car and orders her out. My favorite part of the entire thing is watching her face go to shock as she realizes she just did all that in front of a police officer. She gets slapped in cuffs as the parking officer calls for a second unit, and she's promptly sat on the very curb she tried to drive over, the foreman wrote. The woman would then put up even more yelling and lying to the officers, telling them she was told she could stay at the parking spot and that they never even asked her to move. But things only got worse for the woman. By the end of the ordeal, she was arrested, charged with child endangerment, her kid was in the back of the car the whole time, reckless driving, destruction of property, the porta potty, and driving on a suspended license. On top of all that, she also got her car towed, the kid went home with his grandma, and she went to spend some quality time in a cell, the foreman wrote. I think next time she'll probably think twice about parking in a tow-away zone if she ever gets a license again. This foreman is amazing. He's got a whole lot more patience than I do. Seems to me the mother probably has a history of being totally inconvenienced at the worst times. Appearing in court before a judge should be a reality check. The lesson of the day here is don't be a rude idiot while doing illegal things on a suspended license.